And so you're with me, okay. And this afternoon, members of our funeral service faculty and staff met with the American Board of Funeral Service Education. Almost 3 years to the day when Patrick Preston and I traveled to Mount Ida College to begin the process of taking on the funeral service program. Today, we received our initial accreditation approval as a new program, which is good for 3 years. You may recall that we were accredited for the Teach Out in the fall of 2018 and as a candidate for a new program by the American Board of Funeral Service Education. As I look back, I'm delighted that we chose to enter the funeral service education and welcome so many tremendous people, the faculty, the staff, the program advisory committee, who've really shaped this education and continue to meet the needs that we have across our community. So again, another big hand to our funeral service folk. I'm watching you, Dave. You're my lead person there, so I'm watching your hands. All right. So as we get into some of the meat here, there's 4 topics that we want to touch on today. The first is a read of the reopening plan for the fall of 2021 or 2021. The second is the vaccination expectations for students, faculty, and staff. The third is the reorganization of academic and student affairs and enrollment management. And then the fourth topic is multi-factor authentication. And then we'll have Q&A. So just starting off with where we are now with COVID and the ongoing challenges, we're still looking at that 6-foot restriction for colleges, the requirement to wear the mask, wash your hands. We have the sanitizing stations spread throughout the campus, and we want to avoid the large crowds. Now, it's interesting that the CDC has actually cited a Massachusetts study among 251 school districts involving over 500,000 students and nearly 100,000 teachers and staff. And even adjusting for the community incidences of COVID, the researchers found that cases among students and staff with the 3 feet and the 6 feet distance restrictions were very similar. And they concluded that lowering the physical distancing policy is really, it can be done assuming the masking mandate remains. Now, the issue we have is the decision to pursue this has not been made yet. The CDC has not put out that recommendation to colleges. We are optimistic that by the summer, we may see a change in the 6 feet to 3 feet restriction. And obviously this impacts the number of students that we're able to get into our classes and our labs. With that being said, and as we consider the implications of a cap on class size, I want to reiterate that this is not going to lead to any offsets in compensation for faculty. We're not holding the COVID-related limitation for reducing wages. So if we're capped at 12 people physically for a class, that would be considered a full class. So something to keep in mind as we move ahead. I would also emphasize that we will have PPE supplies available when people are on campus, should they need that. And we do have the ability to work through HR for personal accommodations as they arise with the return of more face-to-face activities on campus. The other consideration as we ramp up some of the functional activities where we have gathering spaces where people come in for appointments, we really want to emphasize the need to schedule appointments beforehand so that we can avoid the increased crowd sizes that we may find if people are stacking up waiting to see individuals for appointments. I do believe there is a review of some scheduling software as well that we're looking at that could potentially be another app. And I don't know, Arlene, if you're within shouting distance,
Yeah, I'm here.
if you wanted to talk about that software real quick.
Well, I think it's something that Christine McCary has recommended to help, called QList, to help with setting up some appointments for students so that we can make sure we can connect with them safely and they're not waiting in lobbies in large groups. I don't know if Christine, if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Sure. I think Arlene, you sort of hit it on the head. So the QLS is something that we're looking into. Some of the institutions are using it. It's been described to me as sort of when you go to the RMV or the DMV and you get a number and you get your wait time. And this is really to, like Arlene said, to avoid long waits in small areas. Students could wait in their car before they come into the building. So we are in the early stages of looking into this to see how this may work. But we do recognize that moving into the fall, having some sort of scheduling system that helps students, staff, and faculty a bit better would be useful. So as more information becomes available, I'm happy to share that out with the campus community.
And related to that, with food service at this particular moment, we're not envisioning that Unidyne will be back online operating as they did 2 years ago. We are looking for some potential options that may be available that could even include pre-ordering food for the entire week so that the providers could really work a schedule to their advantage to maintain some viability. And the seating arrangements and the table distribution and the grossman would be dictated by where we are with the spacing requirements at the time the semester gets underway in late August. So something to stay tuned to. The library will continue with its appointments for the use of the computers and for the online and remote classes, and they have a good system in play. Also, if students are going to be on campus between classes, that would be an opportunity to take advantage of the library facilities as well. I think the other items there, the big picture is we will continue with the masking and, for all intents and purposes, at least plan on that through the end of the calendar year, and we'll see where we are at that time for the rest of the academic year. The spacing, again, at this moment, we're still looking at 6 feet. Hopefully that'll change. That's a big factor. And then obviously, as we get into the vaccine issue, that's sort of a bigger wild card now than it was 2 days ago with the pulling of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. On April 19th, we moved to fully open vaccinations for the entire community, 16 and above. The issue that we see at this moment is that the supply is not going to be readily available to provide vaccinations for everybody. The hope is that once the details on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is worked out, that will enable the resumption of the vaccinations with all 3 providers, and then that will whittle away at the queue so that we can begin to reach that herd immunity. The other implication here is that the delay now may have impacts in terms of how receptive people are to getting the vaccine immediately. They may want to wait and see what else develops over the next few weeks, which again will push back the herd immunity deadline, which could ultimately impact the requirements that we face, including the distancing thing. The other piece to keep in mind is, as we discuss the variants and how the vaccines interact with the variants. There are many unknowns on that front. And that's from our standpoint, the best thing that we can do is be prepared should we have to go through another pivot at some point where we move back online. We need to keep that in the back of our mind just in case we need to be prepared for that outcome. So still many questions. I would almost venture to say there's many more variables than there were a year ago when we made our decisions. Coming back is probably a more difficult process than deciding to move remote, but we are definitely committed to bringing more face-to-face interaction back to campus, actually building around our physical capacity, given the constraints that we have to work with through the public health protocols, but to enable a safe, healthy environment for our faculty, our staff, and our students. That's the goal. So let me transition to the reorganization. Let me just start off by laying out three main points to what has led up to the need to review and consider moving ahead with the reorganization here. And the first is that there's a need to adjust the span of control among all the deans, balancing the load while also acknowledging that there are several growth initiatives that are on the horizon that the deans are going to be involved with as well. The second point is, obviously with Dave retiring, that gives us that moment to examine that area of responsibility and consider making some adjustments there if necessary. And then the third factor is really the growth efforts that are underway. And as we all know, the board has clearly backed the expansion of the number of nursing students by 50% over the next 2 years and 9 months. And we're also in the process of hiring additional faculty that will help us meet these needs as we move forward. VP Rodriguez is taking the lead with Dean Preston to analyze Rad Tech as a potential new program to serve our community and to help with the job needs of our healthcare providers across the Cape. We'll also be starting an analysis to initiate a modest sports program, perhaps including basketball and cross country and even esports. And we're going to revisit the potential partnership with the Y for the use of the college community moving forward. In addition, there will be an elevated focus on enrollment management, aligned with marketing and institutional research in an effort to ensure our timely outreach and response to potential students and remain engaged with streamlined orientations and ongoing support of our existing students to increase both student enrollment, new student enrollment, and our retention. So let me also just mention two other fundamental pieces here about this reorganization. What you see here is that it's geared around growth. There are no layoffs, there are no rifts, there are no reductions in forces here. This is really geared around how do we best lay out the organizational structure so that we can enable growth to occur in some of these areas where we see it happening more immediate than in other areas. There are no needs to physically relocate anyone. It's pretty much self-contained moving forward. So the changes that are occurring are really in the dean's area across the 4 functional categories. And as we sort of drill down on the details, when we look at arts and humanities and Dean McCarron's area, We have the transition of the social sciences, behavioral sciences, and the human services moving into this division collectively. And that would include criminal justice, economics, history, human services, philosophy, the psychology, sociology in that group. Within the health sciences and professional studies area under Dean Preston, the health sciences remain intact with dental hygiene, funeral services, the nursing programs, along with early childhood education, fire science, emergency medical services, the paralegal program, and business administration and hospitality. And then within the STEM area under Dean Crampton, we continue with our engineering sciences, aviation, the cybersecurity networking, computer science, renewable energy, along with general studies will be housed in STEM. The sciences continue and mathematics, as well as the regional STEM network. And then student retention and completion, which is the former Dean Zamba area. We continue on with the O'Neill Center, the support for the Macy program, Advantage and Trio, the Perkins program, the Student Code of Conduct and Student Grievances, Project Forward support, the service learning and civic engagement. We're including the student engagement coordination, as well as the academic advising offices would roll up in this area. And then enrollment management and wellness would incorporate our admissions and recruitment, financial aid, the registrar's office, our life fitness and sports and the esports, as I mentioned, student wellness. We are going to strengthen the alignment with strategic communications and marketing. And this area will, traditionally, it's been a cabinet area that has reported to me. So officially, this will report to the president. And then when we look at a few of our other areas, under the vice president, we have the Center for Corporate and Professional Education that continues unchanged. Online education continues unchanged. And the Wilkins Library and Academic Support Service remains the same. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. As many of you know, we had a series of phishing tests that were performed, one for the state auditors that was fairly recent. The outcome was a little less than desirable. We had a failure rate of approximately 21%, which means people had clicked into some of the attachments within the email itself. And as we move forward to increase our security, especially when we have people that may be logging into the emails remotely from their own computers without necessarily having the latest cybersecurity software on their machines. We are following the advice of the state auditor's office and looking at implementing multi-factor authentication, which would basically require a secondary login when you log in on a new device for the first time. And Rick, I think you're available to give us just a little bit more of an overview on that. or maybe you're not.
I am,
Okay,
but you were doing fine. You
Well,
can keep going if you'd like.
I'm in the deep end, and it's like, okay, well, you know, I have this on some of my emails and when I do some other business activities. And there's that initial login where you're on a new device, you log in and you have to do the multi-factor authentication, and you do it either through a phone or you can do it through another email address and just verify that it's you through the code that they send back. It's a rather simple process, and the outcome in terms of the risk that's reduced to us that something bad will happen is quite substantial. So it's a fairly minor change that really enhances our security.
Yeah, it's small, a small thing for us to get a big bang for our buck with that. So all it's going to be, we're looking at a few different vendors as a potential, but as the slides say, it's one additional step, and we are just trying to be compliant with the best practices and standards, as well as, for instance, our cybersecurity insurance. The premiums for our cybersecurity insurance were going to increase dramatically if we don't take certain steps to make sure that we safeguard our greatest asset, which is the information that we store in our files. So if you want to go to the next slide. So we are currently looking at a minimum 4 different vendors: Microsoft, Cisco Duo, Okta has a solution, as does a company called OneLogin. And all it's going to do, as the president said, is a lot of you do your online banking, and what's going to happen is it's going to send you either a text message or you might have an application on your phone. Google has an authenticator app, Microsoft has an authenticator app, and it will always have changing codes. So it'll say, now give me your multi-factor authentication code, and you put that second code in. So it's just an extra layer of protection for us. We're going to phase this in. Actually, the administrators within our Office 365 system already have multi-factor authentication. I use it every time I log in remotely to my email online, my 4Cs online. I am requested to do multi-factor authentication. And once we determine the best route to go, we will start implementing that, and with a hope to go live for fall for faculty, staff, and students.
Okay, don't go far. So we will have copies of the presentation available, and obviously we'll open up for questions now. I would also say, if you want to follow up with some specific comments to myself or Vice President Rodriguez regarding any of the matters here, we would welcome that as we move forward. So, question.
Oh, sorry, John. There were
Yeah.
some questions in the chat that I started to jot down.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna take a look. So there was a question from Claudine about social distancing and office hours. So I prefer to see the person when I'm talking. So Claudine, I'm thinking that.
Let me stop the share and maybe we can see people.
Perfect, thank you. So one of the things we can look at, Claudine, is hosting office hours either remotely for the next semester because I do know that some of the faculty offices are very small and some of them are shared. So to have the 6 feet distance, if we're staying at 6 feet, would not be possible. So one of the things we could look at is that office hours be held remotely. We will have some open spaces. We've talked about having spaces in Grossman that would allow for social distancing, but that would of course be outside the office. But we are flexible with how those office hours can be held. And that's something maybe you and I want to discuss a little deeper in Mesa. I'm open to suggestions. We do understand that small offices, you're not going to be able to maintain that distance, probably not even the 3-foot distance. So some of the questions I did try to answer in the chat, so I'm gonna,
Okay.
I know,
I saw a
Marcy-
request there to look at the org charts.
okay.
And-
Marcy Smith asked about, will there be a remote option for faculty at higher risks? So we do, I don't know, actually, maybe Paul, you want to take the, it sounds like an accommodation question, Paul.
Sure, it is one of the things that we are considering. The college, many of you may have heard, has completed its search for an ADA coordinator. Her name is Gretchen Nelson. She started with the college, and so we're going to be looking at all of these accommodation requests following existing regulations, both with the Commonwealth and other guidelines, to determine obviously whether they are reasonable and they can be implemented, or whether they have to be accommodated, or if there are additional conversations that we have to have in order to proceed. So there is no direct short answer to that, which is a very, very complicated and very logical question. We'll be handling each one of those cases individually.
How will faculty have an opportunity to have a voice in the reorganization?
So we would welcome the direct response in the form of, if you'd like to send an email. We'll set up an additional forum for Q&A, giving you a little more time to look at the details here. And that'll happen before the semester is out.
Related to that, will these slides be available to the campus community to review, for review?
Yes.
And there was a question about how the potential growth areas were identified and the process for that. What criteria was used to identify areas for growth? Were they chosen because of known sources of external funding? Were they chosen because they were financially more viable, because of known increased demand from students, et cetera?
Yes. Actually, a series of all those pieces. A big driver, obviously, was we could identify the need for the graduates in these areas. There is a commitment of resources as we build this out. Specifically, we're looking at Cape Cod Healthcare for a big driver, a big piece of this. And we have the history of working with them quite successfully through the work that you see with the Teaching and Learning Lab for the Nursing and Allied Health area.
About Rick's presentation on multi-factor authentication, are we allowed to know if an individual, privately know that an individual might have compromised cybersecurity?
Go ahead, Paul.
Obviously, to the extent that the actions of any employee would compromise the institution, that largely falls under the personnel scope. And so with the most recent test, for example, we did have in the area of 140 or 150, correct me, Rick, if I'm wrong.
It was 150, correct.
Yeah, we had 150 of us who failed the test. By failing the test, that means that you actually clicked on a link that you should not. There were all kinds of social red flag warnings that have been issued. I know I sent that out again as recently as March 30th, but we still continue to have a rate. Obviously, the failure rate should be 0. Our failure rate is probably in the area of 19 or 20%. So the direct answer to the question is, those of us in the community who failed the test, Rick and I, through probably remotely through some kind of an email communication, will reach out to you. Is it being done in a sense with some kind of a punitive approach? Absolutely not. It's really going to be done to the extent that it's, look, we need you to be more hypervigilant. There won't be any record in a personnel file or anything of that nature. But in order for us to protect ourselves personally, as well as the institution that we're a part of, we have to be much more careful about how we follow instructions that are unexpected and whether we should click on links that are unrelated to the roles that we have here at the college.
Okay. I don't know if there are any follow-up questions to that. I'll continue. Is Wendy staying in social and behavioral? We're working on some details there, but one of the things I've recommended is that by moving social science to arts and humanities, there is, I think, the potential, the possibility, is certainly a desire on my part that we hire someone who will be able to cover both social science and communications, because communications admin, I believe, resigned shortly before COVID or during that period, and has not been replaced. So I can't see you, Kate Martin, but I'm hoping at least I generated a smile there, or a slight smile. Maybe this is for Rick. Would we be allowed to use something like Google Authenticator?
Yeah, Microsoft Authenticator and Google Authenticator are probably the two most commonly used authenticator apps. And so it will work with either one.
Okay. All right, we've got, because of the different topics, we're getting questions on all the different topics. So I just want to make sure that we kind of try to group these together a bit. Got more than expected here. I think some of them were answered. There's a question about professional staff being required to be in the office 5 days a week. I don't know if anyone wants to take that one.
That's still to be determined. Clearly, people will be in more than they have in the past. We're looking at some options there that it may not necessarily mean that people are in 5 days a week, but they would be available remotely.
A fairly long question about someone, a detailed one about if someone tested positive for COVID and they were in the office, will others who passed hard copy documents with this person be notified? I'm just wondering if that's too specific and maybe should be addressed directly with HR. Paul?
Sure. I suppose I would take a larger view of the answer. Have we had cases since the pandemic where there was an exposure to campus? And the answer is yes. Do we have a protocol in place to notify employees who may have been exposed? Yes. Have we followed that? Yes. Has it happened not only in the main campus, but in some of our other locations? It has happened as well. So we are operating with a very clear process, which includes deep cleaning. In the case of Plymouth, candidly, we actually had to suspend the operations of the program in order to make sure that the facility was properly cleaned and employees were notified. So it's safe to say that we're going to continue with that process that involves notification of any employees who may have been exposed and immediate deep cleaning of the area to ensure that employees have a safe place to work.
With multi-factor authentication, is it going to be needed each time we log in or just once a day?
That has yet to be determined. There are certain applications that allow you to, once you authenticate, let's say on campus, it will save that particular browser setting and it will allow you to re-log in without the use of multi-factor authentication for a period of time. We have yet to determine That's part of the process of determining which solution we go with, I would assume.
And there's a desire to review the charts again. If we could do that, John, and maybe just go through a couple of other ones about clubs, if clubs will be able to meet on campus, I would say, I don't know if Asher's here. I think she's not available right now, but you certainly, we have to keep in mind the social distancing, and I think make sure that we address those issues as well. And then impact bargaining, when is it going to start?
I'll take that one also. The college has a history of fully complying with all elements of the collective bargaining agreements when it comes to any changes in work conditions or terms of employment. We have no indication of changing that, and no intent to change that. And so the direct question I think I saw earlier in the chat was from Claudine, which was whether she will receive a notice of the intent and an effort to schedule impact bargaining. The answer is yes. Very shortly.
So I don't know if John is reviewing the slides. I don't know if people want to ask questions on each of the slides, and maybe it might be best if you unmute yourselves. And
Sergio has his hand up.
Yes, I would like to, give credit where credit is due. Friday, some of the department chairs had a meeting with the president, vice president, and other. I voiced the concern that I heard from some faculty about the lack of information regarding the reorganization. And less than a week later, you are presenting us, the specific information about it. So thank you very much for that.
thank you, Sergio.
So what we'll do at this point is we'll schedule another meeting for some Q&A, and if there's any feedback in the interim, and then, based on what is in that material and those comments, we'll do some refining, and then at that point we would move forward with the impact bargaining. And again, the intent here, I know there's some movement within the organization, but the intent is to strengthen the organization for the future, and how we continue to adapt and move forward. Arlene, I can't see the side, but are there any more questions, or?
What do the dotted lines mean?
Probably, well, in some cases, they should be solid lines, like there's some here that should be a solid. If we go back, in this case, this is not a direct report. This is just more functionality and alignment. And I think that's probably, yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah, with the intent of the dotted line to be to
Sure.
indicate collaboration more than anything else.
Well, yeah, very, very strongly. Hopefully we have collaboration without dotted lines. What are you looking at, Sergio? I know, it's not on the screen, right?
I'm just squinting because I can't see
Well,
very
I know.
well on
We'll
the,
send
on
you-
the small screen on
This
my
is an
computer.
We'll send you a copy.
And there's a couple of questions on air quality. And
I don't know if.
how
Joe-
it will be monitored in lecture and how social distancing in nursing lectures with 80 students.
Yeah, Joe and I, this is Chris. Joe and I talked about it. We are looking at doing air purification in the different classrooms. So we will look at the different locations and try to deploy air purifiers in those locations that make sense. And that is actively underway.
Arlene, I know there was a question that I saw earlier in the chat that had something to do with employees that have pre-existing conditions and what impact that might be related to the return. My best advice is obviously those are personnel matters. We shouldn't really be discussing them in this forum, but to the extent there is any employee that feels that they have a condition that would be considered as an accommodation, again, that information, including any reference from your physician, should go directly to Human Resources, not to your supervisor, in order to ensure the proper privacy on the matter is kept. And we will work with the college's ADA coordinator to determine how to follow and whether to accommodate any such requests.
Yep, and we also have, I'm just scrolling down as fast as I can. There's some comments. Could you speak to the timeline for resumption of in-person events on campus that adhere to currently evolving state guidelines? This would be the ceremonies, student theater productions, PTK, honors reception gallery, as well as outside groups.
Okay, yeah, obviously for starters, the commencement is virtual because it's a bit bigger and a little more challenging. We are lined up to do the pinning for dental hygiene and for nursing the beginning of June, and following the protocols, and it will be for students, faculty, and staff only. There won't be guests or family involved in that. We'll have a live stream of the event, but it's that first test, if you will, of bringing people back for a larger gathering. Dental hygiene will be first, and then that's on June 2nd. Then on June 9th, we will do nursing. And with the current guidelines, we should be able to fit everybody in the Tilden successfully, given the limitation of the scope. Moving forward, we're waiting to hear what happens with the distancing thing. We're still hesitant to make any big commitments on events yet, but we are more optimistic that over the summer there'll be some ability to make some changes and hopefully begin to open that door, especially for the theater piece.
And we have a question about what happens with Dave Zamba's position until the new dean is hired. We will have someone serve as an interim in that position. And I've asked that once this was announced, that Dave set up a meeting for myself and the staff to be able to go over that. And Bill Berry has a question. Will faculty working remotely be required to be on campus this fall, or will this be optional? Will meetings still be held via Zoom, department meetings, college meetings, etc.?
My thinking is for the fall, there will continue to be a Zoom component. I don't think we're out of the woods yet, so I would think that option is going to be available.
Is it true that nursing will be in the basement of Tilden? My understanding, oh, go ahead.
That's okay, but that's an interesting comment. It's sort of, I haven't heard that one yet, but,
Laura, we talked about the main theater for nursing,
yeah, that's,
where you'll be able to socially distance. Yep, thank you, Vana. I believe 2 nursing lectures are both in the main theater. Yep.
there we go. I knew we'd get them out of the basement.
And it's a studio theater. You have a very
Yeah.
nice studio theater there. It's not my basement. I think, you know, it's a very lovely theater. Forgive me if someone covered this, but has the reorg chart been shared with the Board of Trustees?
Only an earlier draft, not this version.
If I'm missing your question, please let me know, because I'm also looking at it, reading through the questions and thinking they might have been answered already. So if I'm off on that, please let me know. Thank you. Plexiglass in the classrooms. Are there plans to install plexiglass in the classrooms?
We can actually
Thanks,
review on
Tom.
a case-by-case basis and put it in where necessary. They should coordinate with Joe, whoever feels the need.
And just to add on that, to the extent that there are, and we've already done this in a number of cases on campus, there are any employees who, based on their job, are facing the public as a part of their work. We already have in a number of cases installed plexiglass barriers as one of the series of actions the college has taken to minimize the spread of COVID-19.
And I will save the chat because I've learned how to do that. And we will, I see there are many comments there, so I will make sure the comments are shared. And Michael, yes, there will be a chance for the org charts to be reviewed by everyone. John, are you posting them somewhere or emailing?
I think we'll do the email.
Thank you.
Colleen, this is Sheila Vaughn in admissions. I just want to give a shout out to Joe and facilities and how wonderful they have been throughout this entire pandemic. And my office has been in registration and financial aid. And I can say that in administration building, they've done a wonderful job of keeping us safe. And they really did a great job of coming in, and they have the plexiglass up, and they've done everything possible to keep us safe and have done a wonderful job of cleaning. And so I just want to let you know that we've been in since last March, and we're doing good and social distancing. And I just want to give them a real big shout out because I know they've been here and haven't stopped. So thank you.
Probably, although we could probably all get a shout out for what we've been through over the past 11 months, but certainly when it comes to moving and working remotely, Rick and his team, when it comes to IT, whether it's making the laptops available, whether it's training people on how to use VPN and so forth and so on, I think an equally appreciative shout out should go to IT for all the work that they've done to take us into a level of operation that no one envisioned 15 months ago.
Lisa Helabrashini has a question. Some people on the org chart have not been funded during the 2020-2021 academic year. Should I assume those positions will be funded in 2021-2022?
We can look at that so we know who we're talking about.
I'm scrolling. Oh, actually,
While you're doing that, Arlene, I just wanted to take another reference to one of the questions earlier about, will professional staff and other staff be called upon to come back 5 days a week, effective a certain date? I think it's important to state that there is no envisioned date where all of a sudden on one day, everyone appears 5 days a week. I believe the president's, discussion and his comments were about a turn and perhaps a staged return to work. But there's no point that that anyone envisions at this moment where everyone starts 5 days a week. Having said that, there will be cases where certain departments, based on their activities, their commitment to students, their operation, where certain departments may start on a 2-day-a-week schedule or a 3-day-a-week schedule, and others may be a bit behind that. And so we in HR are already starting to hear some of the questions about, well, this other person similarly titled in another department is not following the schedule that we are. And the fact of the matter is there are going to be some inequities. It's not something that's going to be addressed universally because there are too many variables involved with the departments and the programs. But the overriding statement is that it will be staged and not going immediately to 5 days a week. I hope that clarifies some of the concerns.
if I haven't addressed your question, I'm scrolling through the participants to make sure any hands raised. Please let me know.
Okay. Well, we'll have a meeting scheduled. We'll announce it by Tuesday. Take Monday off to recover from this, and Tuesday we'll pick up. It's a tough crowd. Look, no one says anything. All right, folks. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.
Sounds like the Waltons here.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Grandpa.
There you go. Hey, hey, hey,
Thanks for the day off.
hey. Yeah.